Well, Charles, I don't know if we have anybody still tuned in, but that was a remarkable little technical problem that was setting us back there. I don't want to go into too many details as far as how it was resolved, but boy.
Yeah, I was trying to watch you try to deal with all these things, but at least we're up now and running, and I think we're joined live by le great Monsieur Fabien Chalandon.
Bonsoir, Fabien.
Well, bonsoir from Europe. Jason and Charles, they're happy to be back again, and I hope our viewers were patient enough to wait until you managed to get your system back, Jason.
Yeah.
Thanks a lot indeed.
Right, and I apologize for that. Hopefully that problem will not come back. That was a major setback. But of course, today, Charles, we're going to be speaking about the jewel of denial.
Yeah, and this time the art department, I mean, it's just, they must compete with one another down there in that department to try to come up with something that outdoes each preceding broadcast.
Yeah, it's always a struggle, that competition. Now, we've included actually a special guest in the poster today. Do you want to talk about what we've got right there, Charles?
Sure. This is a takeoff on the movie Jewel of the Nile, which I think came out in the 80s. I forget whether it was 84, 86, or that time vintage, whatever. And you have swinging from the rafters there, you have Bubba with Hillary, and that's about as close as they've ever gotten in the last 45 years, probably. Holding on to Barack Obama, who would have been Danny DeVito in the movie. Mm-hmm. But really, that is exactly, in my view, my working theory, or I should say our working theory, is that the Clintons have had the Obamas by the posterior, shall we say, for quite a while. And all of this toing and froing between the Trump interests and the Democrats has not yet gone as far enough down the pike to understand the motivation. Why would people be so strenuously attacking Donald Trump? Why would Republicans conspire with Democrats? Why would liberals conspire with conservatives? Why are so many people interested in stopping Donald Trump, or getting Trumpy, as we said in one of our broadcasts long ago? And the reason is that there has been a gigantic, and it's still ongoing, conspiracy to scam as much money as possible under the guise of unregulated globalism. Bill and Hillary were the initial tools in that process when the Soviet Union blew up. You could argue that George H.W. Bush was involved in the project beforehand as well, but just picking on the period, how to monetize the carcass that was the Soviet Union in Central Europe, that's what Bill and Hillary did, working with people in rising China and rising India. And I'm thinking here in particular, working in India with Rajat Gupta, the now disgraced felon who ran global consulting giant McKinsey. So we've laid out many concrete examples that should have prompted investigators around the world, and in particular starting in Washington, D.C., to do something about this mess. But the stink is so big, the stench is so odoriferous, that it has frightened many people from trying to do their work. And so recently, Jason and I and Fabien, we both all understood that something different had happened when this wingnut, who's sporting the bananas, the Chiquita banana dude, Angel Urena, who was the press flack for Bill Clinton, when he decided it was a good move to attack me, just as Jason coined the phrase, the WAPO, not WAPO, the WAPO published an anonymously sourced article 2 Thursdays ago, around 6 o'clock in the evening, suggesting that Huber, the quote, handpicked appointee, handpicked U.S. attorney selected by a Republican AG, had failed to come up with anything with regard to the Clinton Foundation mess. And that rushed into a firestorm with Rachel Maddow blowing that story out of all proportion. Nobody since that story has been issued, other than I think this program and a few souls on mainstream, have bothered to go back to base principles and say, where's the evidence that Huber investigated anything? What were his marching orders to begin with? How come he hasn't contacted any of the key players? Forget me, but any of the key players who have had something to say about the Clinton Foundation over many, many years, indeed decades. How come he hasn't spoken to whistleblowers? How come he hasn't looked at a single show? And by the way, what has taken him so long? Why did he need 2 years to do this with all the resources of a U.S. attorney and the FBI? So this wingnut decided to attack me for A, spreading lies. Jason, of course, came to my defense and quickly tweeted out, "Name one lie." And of course,
Got me blocked.
and that got you blocked. As of now, I'm probably blocked, but as of right before the broadcast started, I wasn't blocked by this guy. And I actually feel pretty sorry for him. I mean, I think he's a young kid who knows how he got his job working for Bill Clinton. I mean, it's not like this is the first press flack to lie for Bill Clinton. That's sort of what he's been doing. Press flacks have been doing for the Clintons since they started getting involved in politics. But here's this guy, young guy. His role is to try to defend Bill Clinton. He does, when Bill Clinton says jump, he says how high. And he makes the mistake of attacking me for spreading lies, which then, all right.
Alleged lies.
Name one alleged lie, dude. And then he attacks me for only appearing on Russian television, which is, so far from being the truth. I mean, hello, this is not Russian that we're on right now. And then he goes further to attack me for being a friend of John Solomon. And obviously he knew probably more about John Solomon's news venture that was announced late last week. He thought that he was being pretty cute with this Russian approach. And he thought he'd get away. He knew he'd get away with the brain-dead mob on MSNBC and CNN who can't balance a checkbook, let alone think through complex issues like the Clinton Foundation. So he thought he was just going to win one, and that we would say, "Oh, I'm so intimidated. Angel Urena is going to make an issue of this." So, we decided we'd fight back a little. And so this whole show, if you could get through this show and conclude that there's nothing wrong with the Clinton Foundation, then I suggest you go move to Mogadishu, Somalia, because there's nothing wrong there either.
Charles, salacious photos abound. This alleged photo of Mr. Urena leaves me with just one question. Are we talking laser or wax? Because he's looking pretty good, I got to say. Good job there, Angel.
He's done a better job on his legs than he did on his face.
Exactly. Fabienne, what do you think about this controversy?
Who is this guy?
This is Bill Clinton's press person who attacked me on Twitter about 10 days ago. He's the same guy, we're going to put up a tweet, he's the same guy who lied about Bill Clinton's contacts with Epstein. We're going to have that tweet in the slides. But this is definitely somebody who deals directly with Bill Clinton.
And did you meet Mr. Epstein?
Well,
we have. It's funny. Well, Jason did a phone call, which didn't go so well for Mr. Urena, and then found a Medium page. The Medium, the site, an article somebody had written, maybe this guy, and it includes video footage of Bill Clinton and Angel landing on St. Thomas during the summer of 2018. St. Thomas being, that airport being very close to the two islands that Epstein once owned. So anyway, what we might do in the interest of time, there's the story there, Jason's got it.
Well, wait a minute. All these things want me to log in.
There you go. Yeah, there's Bill Clinton with a goofy belt and a goofy shirt and a goofy smile and a bunch of goofballs.
So this is officially posted by the Clinton Foundation, so we don't really know who wrote it, but it does sure read like the words of Angel Urena, and it uses his tweets, we can see right here.
And it's February 4th, 2018, so that's quite a bit. Epstein was very much alive back then.
Hang on now. I'm not able to... Boy, I hope we don't have another issue here. I'm not able to... Oops, there it goes. I don't know what's going on with the internet today, Charles, but it's a lot of tweets from Angel Urena. There we go.
Yeah, all in February of 2018. As I say, Epstein was doing what Epstein does. I mean, there are allegations that he was trafficking women as late as 18.
As young as 11.
As young as 11. So, I mean, this is early 18. Exactly where was Jeffrey Epstein in all this time, and where was Bill Clinton, and how much overlap may there have been in this moment between among Bill Clinton, Angel Urania, and Epstein and his people. Incidentally, on this issue, the Clintons are always, whenever there's a natural disaster, they're quick to get in the middle of it and try to grift as much as they can. There was a big to-do about Puerto Rico where Trump criticized the governor and the staff for doing a bad job distributing aid in Puerto Rico, and he was roundly, of course, attacked by the mainstream press for that, mainstream mess, I should say, for those accusations. And just within the last 24 hours, a local person in Puerto Rico broke in to the warehouse where the disaster relief was supposedly stored and discovered that the administrator of the aid was stealing it.
Oh boy.
So anyway, maybe, Jason, in the interest of time, we have quite a few slides to get through. If we could possibly get to that.
Coming right up.
Yeah. So what we're going to take people through today, we have done a large number of slides, many shows with Fabien, because a crucial piece of the puzzle here is that the largest donor to the Clinton Foundation, when you really get into the weeds, the largest government donor is the government of France. And indeed, it's the people of France and the travelers of France who have put via United 650 million into foundations that actually never existed lawfully. So when you look properly at this, when you look through the filings that are available, and I forgive people around the world for not having the time to look at the actual documents that are lodged in Arkansas or the strict rules that pertain to these messes because they solicit funds in New York and California, you can be excused for not knowing these details. But the people who are supposedly trustees of these various entities, and Bill and Hillary and Chelsea, who have all these degrees and credentials and are supposedly so smart, they have no excuse. And they bear ultimate responsibility for operating the biggest unprosecuted set of charity and corruption vehicles, charity fraud and corruption vehicles ever assembled in life. So we're honored to have our good friend Fabien back on. Thanks for joining us from the European time zone. And what we're going to try to take people through is additionally, what is it? Why is it that Mueller and Comey and Rosenstein and so many deep state operatives want Trump out of the picture? What are they trying to cover up? And I think it centrally involves the set of frauds still being operated by the Clintons and their cronies, and covered up for now by the great Angel Urania and his buddies. This mess goes back to 1997 and its predecessor frauds before that. These have flourished under George W. Bush, a Republican president and supposed hostile party to the Clintons. It flourished while Bill was out of the presidency and while Hillary was a senator. It flourished while Barack Obama became president and Hillary was Secretary of State. And it has not done so well since November 2016, but it's far from being dealt with. And what I can report and will report is that we have made a lot of progress in recent weeks. Things are going to go, when they go low, we're going super high. And we are going to go come back in new ways with a vengeance against anybody who would continue either to operate a charity fraud, engage in corruption, or try to cover it up or attack us.
Yeah, they can certainly count on themselves being depicted in a Conchita Rivera, whatever that woman's name is, outfit with the banana hat on. I want to say that Manny Caseberg is wishing Fabien salute, so I guess he's saying hello, and thank you, Manny, for utilizing Super Chat on Crowdsource the Truth 2, where we're live streaming right now. I mean, Charles, we have no direct evidence that what just occurred for the first hour while we were setting up was some form of attack, but certainly everything was working totally fine, and then the router went out. I don't know if it's possible for people to target and attack a specific router, but I guess that's possible. I don't know.
That could have happened.
Yeah.
So why don't we... Go ahead, Fabien.
It's possible, by the way. No, as I said, attacking a specific router, if they know the IP address, they can do that. Anyone can. Well, anyone technically able can do that, from what I understand.
Yeah.
Good.
So it's a possibility for sure.
Good. Well, why don't we move along and take people through the second slide quickly, and then we'll get into some real meat. This format that we have been working together on, this is, I think, our 202nd show. This one will certainly be a 2-hour show, maybe a bit longer. This is a different approach, and it's interesting when we began this, Jason and Fabien, I didn't get pushback from the people I know in mainstream media, but when you go and you appear on the big TV shows or whatever, and the radio outlets, and you talk to the big print reporters, they have a cookie cutter way of doing things. You know, they got to sell those My Pillow commercials on Fox. They've got to have panels that only last for 6 minutes, 8 minutes. They've got to have a pro and a con view. They don't like to get into details. I can't tell you how many famous anchors have told me, look, you've got to keep this down to the 5th grade level, because that's, you know, our viewers. That's the education level they have. And the truth is, for this scandal, no, that's not correct. This is a process, and thank you, Jason, and your supporters for putting up with these, you know, hours and hours of this. We are laying down markers for history, so that as this scandal does get fully exposed, and as people get prosecuted, incarcerated, and severely punished, it will be possible for those who want to study how this mess could ever have been allowed to become such a big mess, to go back and look and see, this is what we said when, these are the people who obstructed. The second the dominoes start to fall, you're going to have insiders singing to try to get a leniency and not be punished as aggressively as the worst offenders will eventually be punished. So this is an approach we took.
Singing, Charles.
Sorry?
Well, you said we're going to have insiders singing. It
Not
causes me to think that there could be a Carmen Miranda number coming up.
Hopefully he will not be singing. He can't
Is
talk
this
well.
show a dating show, by the way?
We could get you his number if you're interested, Fabien. I do have it.
No thanks. Thanks, no thanks.
Then we could do La Cage aux Fools instead of La Cage aux Folles.
Yeah, La Cage aux Fools, yes. Well, you will laugh, but the guys actually that played the role of that theater piece, which was a huge success in France, took as their name my father's and my mother's name, which is a rather odd combination. So nothing to do with my father's and my mother's situation, but they took this combination of names, which doesn't exist anywhere else outside of our family. Yeah.
Wow.
They seriously based it on your parents?
Well, I don't know how they came up with that combination, okay, but there it was.
You may want to have a private chat with your dad about that one.
Well, he's 99, so it's becoming a bit complicated.
Yeah, all right. So the approach we take here is, rather than pitching this to the 5th grade, we've been pitching this to professionals, to people who are truly interested in reforming charity land and in bringing these brigands to justice. We take the approach of trying to enlist you, and I'm very grateful for the many emails and Twitter and tweets and direct messages that I get from many, many people now, and also from people who are stopping me on the street and come up with suggestions and offer praise and sometimes criticism. I appreciate that interchange, because it means this is working, that people around the world are really developing an interest. I'm sure some were disappointed that we didn't come on right at 3 p.m. The approach we take here is to give you a working theory that we think is backed up by good evidence, and then encourage you to check the evidence for yourselves. And if you like what you see, circulate it to people who are still pro-Clinton, pro-Obama, and pro-corruption to get their response. The United States, and indeed around the world, is definitely divided. There are people who want and embrace unregulated globalism. They get on the inside by paying off crooked politicians. They don't have to play by the rules. They become mega billionaires, and they laugh at the rest of us who are trying to play by the rules. Then there are other people, the people who watch this show, who say, wait a minute, that is not a game. We don't want to see the biggest market in the world become Venezuela, under a Bernie Sanders and an AOC. We'd like to see the American market and the larger markets around the world embrace law and order and run away and punish corruption. We like to see a level playing field. And so in our approach, we give you the working theory, we give you these slide presentations for free. You can download them electronically, assuming the internets are not broken. And you can then follow links to your heart's content. There's a lot of material in every one of these presentations. Jason has put this all together, and that you can also follow Fabien. But Jason has put this all together in an excellent playlist. Who knows, someday the good gremlins will somehow figure out a way to put this together in a some kind of book or something or other that would showcase all these different posters and give them the due that they really are owed. As I say, this is this 202nd presentation. Just the playlist, just the table of contents really for these videos has 34,000 views. Some people are quite happy to have 34,000 views for a 2-minute segment. So there's a lot of content out here. Once the right switch is flipped in the IRS and the right switch is flipped at these U.S. attorney offices and attorney generals around the world, once the correct switch is pulled, this information should be invaluable. Now, am I a trained lawyer? No. So I'm sure there are people who have prosecuted criminal cases who will have, with all this evidence, the optimal way in mind to bring this criminal conspiracy to an end. We have in prior shows listed out U.S. statutes that we believe have been violated, but these are just views of people who know how to read, not trained lawyers. So encourage also people to visit my site, to follow me on Twitter, and Jason, of course, on Twitter. And indeed, Fabien is becoming more and more of an epic tweeter. And I think, Fabien, your tweets are getting some impact now, aren't they?
Well, I have no way of measuring that, but I do recall Mr. David Nunes in one of his broadcasts thanking foreigners or foreign tweeters for actually directing him into areas he had not thought about. So I'm not saying it was alluding to me specifically, but certainly the foreign tweeters and people who have followed up on the various aspects of the Russian hoax and the email hoax and the number of hoaxes that happened over the past few years did contribute to the investigation, which has been ongoing now for 2 years, and for which Mr. Nunes is basically a hero.
We have a phrase here, or the Texans have a phrase here, when somebody is basically a big talker with nothing behind him, it's all hat, no cattle. And here, I think what we're talking about is all hoax, no cattle. There's very little about the Clinton Foundation that is authentic. Even less about the Obama Foundation. And then you get into some of these, the McCain Foundation is another hoax. So with that, maybe we jump to the first slide. Maybe third slide, rather. Maybe, yeah. So for those people, and I know, you've got to have the patience of I don't know who to 5 years into this, and who knows if we need another 5 years, but to say that we should keep pushing on it. But here's a very good story, Jason and Fabien, that came out today, I think. And it's sourced by Catherine Herridge, who was a longtime Fox reporter. For whatever reason, she's now over at CBS News. But this is an article people should really read carefully. that is suggesting that John Durham has done his work and is specifically pointing out a few things. One, that Durham is working with grand juries, which is very good news.
How'd they get to that? I'm curious to know about that.
I don't know. Catherine Herridge has her sources. I just don't know. But there's a very long, it's a long piece. So on the one hand, it's suggesting that grand juries, at least one grand jury may have been impaneled, and more that Durham has widened this investigation. It is not, a little sort of inquiry or a matter. This is a criminal investigation. CBS has run with this story, which is interesting, the mainstream actually running with a story like that on television. And it's, what they're focusing on is that there's quite a long paper trail. Now, we've seen that. I mean, there's an enormous paper trail here. When you understand that the focus, the people who are after Trump do not want the gravy train that is the Clinton Foundation and others like it to end, and they don't want the truth to be known about where trillions of dollars has disappeared in government spending to corrupt friends of politicians who finance these campaigns. They just don't want that game to end. So they're throwing everything they can against Trump and have been doing this really since prior to election night 2016. So there's, I think, good news that at least people believe there is a strong paper trail. I know there's a strong paper trail because I've looked at much of it, and I don't even have the inside stuff that the FBI and the IRS should be able to get.
I'm curious about the grand juries, because in a conversation with Larry Klayman just the other day, he said there has been no indication of grand juries being impaneled.
Well,
who knows?
Who knows? So the next thing that's quite interesting, this conservative treehouse is a good site for, I know Fabien goes there and Jason, but I encourage people to go to it, particularly Sundance. And in a recent interview, Sidney Powell is now saying that they have forthcoming a witness who viewed the original 302 and will confirm that it did not implicate Flynn. And the official FBI position, I don't know if it's changed, is that they can't find the original 302.
Oh.
Now Powell says we have a witness that...
They can't find it.
I know, it's a dog ate my homework.
Yeah, it's in the same
it's
drawer as the Epstein videos from the jail cell.
Right, it's another nothing burger. But here we have Sidney Powell claiming that they have a witness, I don't know if that was going to come forward publicly, who will verify that the FBI knew that Flynn did nothing wrong. Now, this is related to the first link we put up there. If Durham's focus is on how the Mueller probe got started, right? You've got to understand the Clinton Foundation piece of it. Once you don't have to watch all 202 videos now, but you'd be well advised to go to my site and read the original position paper from April 20th. Have a team of people, if you haven't already done it, pick some of the choice recent videos, and you'll understand that the second Trump actually won, this team went into hyperdrive, saying, "Oh my God!" And Hillary Clinton, I believe, was quoted as saying, if he gets through, we're all going to hang. She is not so stupid that she doesn't understand that eventually, if you spend your life as a criminal and a law and order team comes in that wants to be serious about bringing you to justice, you are going to hang. And I don't mean figuratively. So this is a piece I wrote. I periodically go back and look at it. It was published April 20th, 2015 on my site. And I've learned a lot more since I published this. But the meat of it, this is actually 6 September 2016 you've gone to here, but that's a more recent one. But I did another one April 20th, 2015. And then this was the one that came out right before the election.
When they're on charlesortel.com, what's the best way to get right to that?
You have to, you're asking me. I'll tell you the simpler way is to go on to Google and do First Foundation Report into Google. And you might even get it without my name, but if you put First, it should come up.
I included your name just to increase the odds.
Yeah, there you go.
Okay, so great. So it's the first thing that shows up. So I just put in First Foundation report, Charles Ortel, and the very first return from Google was that.
Right, and I would say that Angel Urania, you might consider a few important facts here. That was published after Hillary announced, but before Donald Trump announced. Okay, so Donald Trump was not an announced candidate. I had done, this has other links to previous work that I had done in various places. But the original thesis articulated in this paper and the questions raised in it remain unanswered by government authorities. You should start here, Mr. Durham and your team, and you'll do your own work, which I think is the correct thing to do anyway. But there's no way that a team of investigators and lawyers and forensic accountants who understands what the applicable charitable laws are and regulations are, there is no way that such a team would conclude, forget about spending 2 years on it, spending 1 week on this, you would come away saying, I know how to balance the budget. You know, I go, this is a massive fraud that Harvard has supported and Yale has supported and Bill Gates has supported and a lot of financially endowed private foundations have supported. None of these people should have donated to this fraud. All of them are guilty of gross abuse of their authority and powers. Every single one of them should go into the penalty box. You turn them upside down. I'm not saying Riyadh style, you know, in the Ritz-Carlton or whatever, but you shake Harvard and Yale and Columbia and these different Gates Foundation and other people, and you say, listen, boys and girls, you were playing this unregulated globalism game with the Clintons because you wanted to become, you weren't happy at Harvard to just be there in Boston and Cambridge. You wanted to spread your wings all over the place. You wanted the corrupt sons and daughters and sons of corrupt people around the world to send you a whole bunch of money to the foundation so you could overpay your professors and your staff. And you are beyond this idea that national laws should apply to a Harvard or a Columbia or other places. And so you went all in, mostly because most of the college campuses lean far to the left. So you saw an easy game. You saw a way to maybe not make as much money as some of your financially oriented graduates did out in Silicon Valley or in hedge funds. But you saw a simple game for yourselves. And you, in the process, destroyed or have come very close to destroying the reputation for the many people who care that charities be properly run. So if we jump back actually into the slide there, I want to give tribute to Richard Pollack in the third link. Richard is a guy who, and I don't know if his picture will come up here, he has found the fountain of youth because, I think it will be here. Here's Richard Pollack. And Jason, how old would you guess he is? If you know, don't.
I don't know.
But just looking at that picture, how old would you think?
Like 62, 3.
He's almost 70.
Yeah.
And he's a very interesting guy who started out as a left-leaning young guy and a reporter and ended up at ABC News where he was the producer in Washington, D.C. for whatever it is, Good Morning America, I think. And then he was the producer, the first producer, I think, at Fox News Sunday. He decided after a while that he'd had enough of that, so he went to the Daily Caller, where he has been, for a long time, was an investigative reporter there. I eventually found my way to him in 2015-16 timeframe. I worked with him on many stories. His approach is old school, correct journalism. You know, look at the facts, look at the evidence, triple source everything, put in different points of view, and come and give your viewers a chance, or your readers in some cases, a chance to come to an informed conclusion. And he's a very fair-minded and decent individual as well, plus good sense of humor, and a great writer. So Richard has this bombshell 3-part series. This is the third one. I know, Fabien, you sent me a link by email. This is the third part of his story, which came on air just after the WAPU piece suggesting that Huber had done his work and there's nothing to see at the Clinton Foundation. Richard whips this up at One American News Network and goes whole hog into the fact that there's yet another whistleblower, Nate Kane, like Doug Campbell, who gave information into the powers that be, and that should have gone to Huber long ago.
Now, wait a minute. Is he the guy that went to the FBI and wanted to go into the skiff?
That's yet another person in the State Department that we don't know about.
How do we know that it's not him?
It's not him, because this guy's not a State Department person, I don't think. So we have multiple people. If you're sitting there, and you're trying to be as fair and objective as the left and the mainstream say they are in the media, you have Campbell's points. You have Nate Kane's points. Nate Kane, this is a shocking story here. Nate Kane gave information to the channels to say there's a serious problem, and it involves using the Clinton Foundation as a laundromat to I think, I'm not sure if this is Kane's allegation, but others are alleging that in Ukraine, as an example, the Ukrainian government wanted more aid, and a deal may have been concocted in the 2015-16 timeframe to get at that aid, but to pay bribes to people using the Clinton Foundation. So this guy makes some allegations, and what does the FBI do? They raid his home. They don't follow the trail. They raid him.
That's what they always do, Charles.
Yeah, I know. So that is what they have been doing to date. But one hopes that Richard is intimately familiar with my work on the Clinton Foundation. He extended that work himself by going around the world and following different leads. There are I'd say there are at least 15 stories he did, and with my help or my input. And this now builds on that body of work. So anybody who would echo Angel Urena, the dancing banana, and think that there's nothing to the Huber story, is somebody who basically will say anything.
Right. Not like John Cusack.
Yeah. Then this is interesting. I mentioned, Jason, to you and Fabienne, we obviously weren't able to talk before the show, immediately before the show. But here is, if you go down this page a little, I'm not sure what News Thud is, but this is this Jack fellow, also connected to One American News. Does he not work for them as well?
I think he does.
Yeah. You see the Judiciary House uploaded files. I hadn't had a chance to read all the files, but I think this is some of the information that John Solomon has been working with for a while, and they're trying to piece together who was getting this information to whom and what time frame, and what was really going on in Ukraine. And I don't know what an extraction report is, Jason, do you?
Can't say unless somebody in the Ukraine is going to an esthetician. But what is this? We're looking at instant messages from what platforms? This is WhatsApp, I guess.
Well, this is, hi Derek, it's Lev. That must be Lev Parnas. I'm outside in front of the Capitol Club on the 4th of February, 2019.
I don't know, Charles. So much of this seems like the type of crap we've seen on the internet from social engineers. This is difficult for me to take seriously as evidence unless it's authenticated in some way.
Well, we'll see. But I just put it out there. I mean, it's worth people in our crowd looking through this, and maybe it's bogus, maybe it's not. But it's certainly the case that when we look at Clinton Foundation operations in Ukraine, they are totally illegitimate. Clinton Foundation was never authorized to do any work outside Little Rock, let alone in Ukraine, which, though it has challenges, is not a developing country. It is much richer than most. So Fabien, you probably won't be able to get this in time for your flight. You'll have to pick it up when you get to wherever you're going. But Peter Schweitzer's book has now been, there's a short excerpt that's in the New York Post today. And any donor today who seriously thinks that Joe Biden has a chance of getting the nomination and then beating Donald Trump is a donor who's probably signed those petitions every year or every election year where rich dolts say, I want the new president to raise my taxes. Here's my name. I want to sign my name as somebody. I want to pay more taxes. Those are the type of people who may support Joe Biden. But after you read this book, this little excerpt talks about 5 different members of the Biden family who've gotten rich off of his public service. And meanwhile, Joe has been going around the country saying, well, I don't talk business with members of my family. I mean, Fabien, is Joe Biden respected in France?
I don't know. I never heard about him before became a candidate. And as a vice president, I didn't really understand what he was doing. What I've heard recently, and I don't know if it's true because I didn't have the time to try to start double checking one way or the other, but I understand that some of the aid money the US channeled to Ukraine has gone missing and was paid into Privat Bank, which is owned by the same guy that controls Burisma,
Right.
at the very same time where Biden Jr. was appointed to the board.
Yeah, it's right across
Have
the
you heard
street
about that?
from yes. Privat Bank is right across the street from Burisma in Cyprus, which, I don't know, you guys are huge financial experts. What do we know about Cyprus and weird banks that exist there?
Never been to Cyprus. Have you, Fabien?
No, I've never been to Cyprus, but Cyprus banks went down and almost drove Cyprus down as well. Was it 6-7 years ago? And the bulk of the money that went through these banks was Russian. It was a favorite Russian money laundering place. I don't know if it's still used by them because they lost 90% of their money in that process.
Let's just put it this way. If you're working on a legitimate business deal, there can be, depending on what it is, there can be a reason to use a tax haven that typically involves complex deals where there are investors from all over the world who have different tax regimes they're trying to follow. You can decide, in fact, many well-run and honest funds operate, for example, in the Cayman Islands. I know it sounds like, wow, why would you do that? But there is good reason to do that. If you're doing a deal involving Russia, I think Fabien is right, generally a lot of the international investors and Russia, a lot of those deals used to be routed through Cyprus. International investors in India, a lot of those deals are routed through Mauritius. But if you're a French person and an American person trying to do a legitimate deal, the last thing you come up with, unless I suppose you're doing it with the Clintons, is let's route the money through Cyprus. It's not smart. So, the latest on impeachment is going to occupy some of the air for the coming week. It may not get as much attention as people think, because I gather that Donald Trump has decided he's going to maybe go to Davos in the middle of it. But the idea, one thing that I think is interesting, the Democrats' supporting brief runs over 100 pages, apparently. The initial response from the Republicans is only 7, which I think is a good sign.
That's good news. No, that's good news.
Yeah, because I think Jason's a fan of this as well, and there's a story that just broke in the press here moments ago that initially McConnell was reluctant to embrace the idea of a dismiss thing. He's now changed his tune, apparently.
Good.
And I really do think on stuff like this in the Senate, the senators have to think not simply about Trump and whether they dislike or like Trump. They have to think about what this trial is going to do to the office of the U.S. president. Now, it'd be one thing, I don't mean to pick on Somalia, but it'd be one thing if we're Somalia and what happens to the president of Somalia could stay in Mogadishu. When you are the United States of America or the government of France and you have a trial like this, you have a lot of wealth in both countries, a lot of people in both countries, a lot of history in both countries. You don't want to see this shift show become the kind of dangerous precedent that quickly takes a great nation. For example, Venezuela was a strong power Fabien was in Venezuela in the 80s when it was a good place. You don't want the United States to become modern-day Venezuela, and Nancy Pelosi's shift show has got us on that path. You have some observations about Venezuela, Fabien?
No, well, today, not really. You know, the only thing I can say is that at that time I was involved into a major oil deal, which is still running today. I sold most refining and distribution assets owned by Union Pacific to Petróleos de Venezuela, and after that, Venezuela decided to purchase more refining and distribution assets in the US, and today still controls 20% of the US gasoline market. I've seen that mentioned only once in an American newspaper. That's still the case today. So, you know, to basically destroy Venezuelan economy, it's very simple. The US can simply seize or nationalize Petróleos de Venezuela's assets in the US. And since that deal was actually, I mean, the main rationale at that time was Venezuela had great difficulties in selling its oil because it's very heavy oil, cheap and dirty. So you needed at that point a special coker, which costed about $1 billion at that time, to actually refine into lighter products this very dirty oil. And, you know, they would be today basically taken out of the market if that happens. And that's something the US can still use as a leverage.
Yeah.
Okay. And I'm just surprised it hasn't.
Well, stay tuned. So, thank you for that, Fabien. What has also emerged in the news in the last 48 hours or so is that, of all people, Ken Starr and Alan Dershowitz have joined the Trump defense team. And I know, Jason, you've got views on that.
Yeah, I mean, you know, it seems odd to me. I mean, didn't Trump say that Kenneth Starr was a dope? And also, isn't Kenneth Starr a dope? And Alan Dershowitz, I don't know, my feeling is, although he's a very skilled lawyer with a lot of experience, it seems like his having represented Epstein in the past could present a problem, because now what's going to happen is if Dershowitz says or does something that gets the president exonerated, they're going to say, oh, you know, this is all a big Epstein cover-up, and what's Trump hiding with Epstein? I mean, these, you know, Trump has got a gang of social engineers after him who are socially engineering the public to believe that, you know, anything that he does is the next terrible thing. So I'm sort of looking a step ahead, and I don't know. I would have rather seen him take Larry Klayman on his team, but I guess Larry's not a constitutional lawyer. Alan Dershowitz is. These are complicated things.
Yeah, I just don't like the fact that Starr wasn't able to bring home the Whitewater prosecution, which, you know, you think about Whitewater, you think about the Clinton Foundation. Whitewater was a rehearsal for the Clinton Foundation. Whitewater was a land development deal where the governor of Arkansas, then Bill Clinton, could have made a big positive difference in the value of this crappy land that a bunch of investors bought somewhere in remote Arkansas. Similarly, once Bill got to be President of the United States, downtown Little Rock, portions of it were a mess. And a decision to site this double-wide trailer known as the Clinton Presidential Library on the land in Little Rock where it is currently sited changed the whole valuation scheme for Little Rock. And given the amount of time that it took to get the project up and running, it faced a lot of local opposition. It gave well-connected people to the Clintons the opportunity to create the kind of economic growth, whether it's through real estate redevelopment or whatever, that causes in 2004 the Clinton Foundation to brag in its own, in quotes, annual report that the placing of this double wide created $2 billion in economic development, right? This project only cost, they say it only cost, cost 160 million. I believe it actually cost something more like 80, maybe. And so a decision to spend 80 million or so, 100 million or so on the double wide on the wrong side of town in Little Rock that lets people make $2 billion. And it doesn't take much of an imagination to look at that and say, that sounds a hell of a lot like fraud. You know, this is not a project to build a library. This is a project to enrich people who knew about the library. So, Fabien, I won't go deeply into it unless you want to. Sorry?
I just have one addendum on Mr. Derovich. What's his name? Mr. Trump's lawyer.
Dershowitz.
Dershowitz. I just listened to him while we were waiting to be connected. And he's been appointed by Mr. Trump as his lawyer on one very specific issue, which is constitutional law, on which Mr. Derovich is apparently pretty knowledgeable. And the main issue is that you cannot impeach unless there is a crime or something which is akin to a crime.
Right.
And there's been a constant interpretation going back to the first impeachment, which of one of your presidents, which name I forgot. And he was quite adamant and very precise and quite forceful, even powerful in his argumentation just about an hour ago. I wanted just to say that.
Thank you.
Yeah. I saw him on, Dershowitz was talking with Anderson Cooper and Mr. Toobin, I think his name
Jeffrey
is.
Toobin, yeah.
Toobin, who was a student of Alan Dershowitz, who's now empowered as a full-fledged jerk on CNN. And he was challenging Dershowitz. I mean, look, you know, I still say it was a bad idea to bring in Dershowitz. Why didn't he get Jonathan Turley? He's also a constitutional lawyer who hasn't been connected to Jeffrey Epstein. But I agree with what Fabien is saying, and it's an ironic that a citizen of France is speaking more sensibly about this than some of the communist Americans on the Communist News Network and MSNB communists. But yeah, there's no crime there. So this is why I've been banging so hard on this notion of a motion to dismiss.
Well, another area, and Fabien, I'm not going to reveal anything that you don't want to reveal, so I'll let you explain what you want to explain about this. But it happens that with regard to the situation in Iran, that we are joined today by somebody who knows a hell of a lot about Iran, and that would be Fabien. So I think our viewers would be quite interested to get your take on it. I mean, the left, the Nancy Pelosi types and others were lionizing, so, you know, venerating the Soleimani and saying it was outrageous to kill him and assassinate him, that he was just a general. You know, why did Trump do that? Maybe you could spend a few minutes, Fabien, and give us your thoughts, because I know you have some.
Yes. Probably the first time I went to Iran was in 1975. I was working for the French embassy, so for the French government. It happens also that for reasons I will not explain any further, I was intimately linked to one Iranian family, quite famous, quite powerful, going back probably 100 years, and a key linchpin of Iranian history. Mr. Soleimani is a terrorist. Okay, so when I saw some of the Democrats defending this gentleman, who is certainly a very efficient terrorist, I couldn't believe it. I just can't explain how decent and intelligent Democrats would take that position. The view here in Europe is that Mr. Trump actually did a masterstroke.
Wow.
In doing what he did. It's actually the title of The Economist, which is not really, pro-Trump, let's put it that way. I think, going backwards, the Iranians, through the Quds Force and the Revolutionary Guards, for which they act as their undercover operatives outside of Iran, they've been basically destabilizing the entire Middle East and pushing the goalpost or the yellow line inch by inch to test not only Americans' reactions, but Europeans as well. So that's, what they've done over the past few months, for example, arresting or stopping, seizing ships in the Gulf, in the Gulf, and also attacking U.S. bases, and even planning to, from what I understand from the French side, even planning to attack U.S. embassies, was too much. There's a point beyond which the only response is what exactly Mr. Trump decided to do, quite courageously, I have to say, against, I would qualify that as the deep stupidity of Democrats and commentators I've heard coming out of the US, unfortunately. Now, having said that, I just want to remind your American viewers that the first coup organized by America, and bearing in mind that America has managed or organized about 50 coups since the Second World War around the world. So meddling in foreign politics is a US specialty. But I just wanted to remind American viewers that the first coup the US ever organized was actually against Iran in 1953. And it toppled a democratically elected government in which some of my friends were actually, and who had been fighting the Shah's father. And he was replaced by, the government of Mr. Mossadegh was toppled by US and UK elements. It also happens that when I lived in Brazil, the late 70s, I was quite close to a very well-known Brazilian ambassador called Mr. Hugo Goutier, and he was ambassador of Brazil in Tehran in 1953. And he confirmed to me that he actually, at the request of America, he exfiltrated the Shah's father.
Wow.
So, we've been paying in Europe and in the US that very stupid decision. That's what I wanted to say.
I totally agree with you. And most people, frankly, in this country, I can't speak for what people may have been learning in university in the last 25 years, but I know that when I went to the places I went to, very few people would steep themselves in international relations. They might study it, they might take the odd course, but we, at that time, were very much inward focused as a country, concerned about the risks posed by Soviet Union and Communist China. And it was a brave person who said, I think I'm going to dedicate my life to international relations because we were facing the potential of real hot wars. So thank you for those perspectives, Fabien. We're going to race through the balance of this.
For some reason. It's back. I don't know what's
Hello?
going on.
Yeah, I hear you now.
We're back. The sound cut out for a second and came right back. Can you hear us,
You
Fabian?
went dead, Charles.
All right.
We're back.
okay.
Inexplicable.
What we're going to do is, if we could just look at this Gateway Pundit slide quickly. And Fabien, what we're going to do is, once I get done with this page, we're going to turn to the one-page thing that you sent me by email, which Jason has at the ready. So I'm just letting you know that that's coming. We track here, and we made an issue in one recent show of the fact that at the Toledo rally, 40% of the attendees at the Toledo rally were independent and Democratic. This is now saying in the more recent Wisconsin rally, over 50% of the people who showed up at this crowd, and I watched some of this rally. It's far better than even good TV. It's really interesting to watch the presentation, the reaction, the back and forth, the spontaneity of it. 50% of the people who showed up at this raucous rally, the most recent one, were not Republicans. Now, I could tell you, as somebody who showed up at a Sanders rally back in 2016, that there might have been, out of the 20-odd thousand people in Washington Square Park, maybe there were 3 or 4 other people like me, but it was, a uniform crowd. And that tends to be the way in the past these rallies had worked. You know, the Democrat rallies are all Democrat, the Republican all Republican. And the independents in the past, I would argue they didn't go to either rally. They were sick of business as usual. To see this type of statistic be the case in January, early January 2020 rather, harken back to early January 2016. It was just then that Trump was making his moves. The primaries were upon us. He had not solidified his role as the likely contender. Jeb Bush still had a chance in January of 2016. Here you have...
I thought it's Yeb.
Yeb, exactly. Dreg, Yeb, whatever. Had corrupt Yeb Bush, had a shot. And here we have Trump, you know, with no serious opposition in the Republican primaries, pulling off this kind of a stunt in a crucial portion, a crucial state, and getting this type of interest. People were saying, you know, we didn't take this guy seriously in 15, 16. Let's hear what he has to say. And Jason and I were looking at going to a rally, but it just didn't work out logistically. So I went through the process of applying for the tickets. And when you do that, you have to fill out all kinds of information about your political preferences and this and that, which go into a file. And I'm now besieged by emails and texts every day from the Trump campaign. But this guy, Brad Parscale, is a very smart guy. I gather you, Jason, know him? Or?
Well, I knew his dad. His dad was the CEO of a software company that Lee Stranahan had worked for at one point that made a lot of stuff that I used. So there's been some limited interaction with his dad, but not for years.
But look, these statistics here that are up on the screen should terrify anybody who is thinking about writing a check or who is basing their future on thinking that Donald Trump won't be reelected. Note that 25% of the people who went to this rally were not even from Wisconsin. Now, Wisconsin is placed in the state, so it's easy to get there from other states. Almost 58% were not Republican, and over 4,000 people who attended that rally didn't vote in 2016. I am sympathetic with that. I did not vote in 2016 for a special set of reasons. I didn't want to be accused of being, you know, a partisan Trump supporter, and there are other reasons. But I think a lot of people who looked at the choice, corruption Hillary, crooked Hillary, versus showman Trump, said, you know what, I'm going to sit this one out. You know, I don't care. Particularly if you're in a state where it's a Democrat state and you're a Republican, what's the point of voting? Your vote is not going to really make a difference. But to see this type of data, this should scare the living daylights out of the motley crew of candidates who have announced on the Democrat side. And it should also chill the interests of people like a Bloomberg, like a Hillary, and like a Michelle, to think that, you know, with their baggage, that they're actually going to take this guy on. If there's somebody out there who is a compelling human being, in other words, somebody who can relate well to people, who has had a consistent pattern of accomplishment, who has thoughtful ideas, who has the ability to get a lot of money together quickly, I don't know of that person on the Democrat side. And I think those statistics are very, very scary. As for Hillary, you know, I would remind people, I know, Fabien, you also know about the situation in Libya very well. Hillary has convinced somebody to put together a long documentary on her life that will air at the festival, Sundance Festival, that I know Jason loves.
It's going to melt the snow.
And that's in March typically, right? Early March?
Yeah.
And people need, as they think about Hillary Clinton and as they think about Barack Obama's legacy, they need to remember that right now, or tomorrow morning, I guess, slave markets will open for business in Libya. That was the Barack Obama, Hillary Clinton, John Kerry, John McCain contribution to a crucial country, actually, a country where there are great difficulties inside Libya, but at least it's a small population with a lot of accumulated wealth and a lot of oil. Here, an African-American president who spent his entire terms talking smack about inequality and about, you know, how he was going to help people, destabilized a dangerous part of the world in much the same way as America destabilized Iran, as you point out, in 1953. at a moment in time where we didn't need another set of problems. Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton broke Libya and bragged about it. Hillary actually was quoted as saying, we came, we saw, and he died. Joking and making light over the fact that Muammar Gaddafi, who by all accounts was cooperating with the United States and the Allies, that he was killed.
Yeah, if I may interject, Charles, just I give you the, if you allow me to do so, I just want to give you a view as, the viewpoint of some Libyans I've heard so far. For them, they were, you say, enthralled. Sorry, just to keep that. And they were enthralled by Italians until the end of the Second World War, enslaved, basically. Okay. So after that, they've managed to become an independent country. And since, Libya is an accumulation of conflicting tribes, Mr. Gaddafi managed, and I'm summarizing 40 years of history, to get some sense out of that governance, and basically, and I've heard that from a number of Libyans, he managed to create a self-standing country with providing one home for free for about everybody, first-class hospitals, and free education, including in US top universities for anyone who wanted. That has been destroyed, totally. And that's not acceptable. That's what I wanted to say, too.
Thank you, Fabien. One wonders what that is on his lap there. That picture doesn't look too good.
I think it's a tray standing up on the table,
on which
with
lap?
figs on it.
Oh, that's what it is, the top of, okay, yeah.
I'm always thinking three-dimensionally, Charles.
It looks like a big floating chocolate chip cookie or something of those. Anyway, why don't we jump in? It's a nice image, though.
Knowing the Middle East, I'd say it's figs.
That probably is right.
So basically, the French and the Americans did in Libya the same mistake than in Iraq. Once they moved in, they had no plan B to run the country. And that's a big problem with all interventions, which have basically no plan to run the country after the invasion.
I find that more than generous, actually, because saying that they had no plan sort of suggests that there was a plan in the first place. I think they just wanted to destroy the place and create chaos so that you'd have African refugees flooding through Libya into Europe, and basically the whole place is out of control. And then they can kill everybody there and say, oh, we need to intervene, buy more bombs, etc.
You could say as well that in this country and in similar places, large countries where there are few parties, you could make the point that not only did Democrats and Republicans not have a clue as to what to do when they invaded country A or country B, Democrats and Republicans under unregulated globalism don't have a clue how to manage this nation. That's not their objective. Right. Their objective is to pretend that they're doing something and then to concoct all these different schemes that members of their family can grift into.
Yeah. Thomas Tyson suggests it might be a tray of baklava.
There you go.
Isn't that Greek?
Is that brown baklava?
I don't know. I think it's figs.
So just to close, we have on this page, and then we're going to jump into some developments that are quite something. It's apparently the case that is no longer Prince and Princess Harry and Meghan. They've decided to exit stage left and build their brand while they also try to run a new foundation. And I would say, don't listen to Barack Obama on this one. I mean, don't go down this path without really doing a lot of homework, and take care. This is a very thoughtful article, actually. It has a lot of good links that the two of them and their advisors better read carefully. And I also would commend for their consideration a link at the bottom. We've we've suggested it in the past. It's called "There's No Such Thing as a Free Gift," and it's a book about the Gates Foundation and the trouble that one knowledgeable person thinks that they're going to end up being in. So it's a noteworthy development that such a high-profile young couple would think that it makes sense to exit the royal family, which is, I mean, how do you lose as a senior member of the British royal family? I mean, maybe it's just too boring, but this is a very excellent book by Lindsay McGooey. I've enjoyed reading it when it initially came out. I hope she's working on a new one. And up until she wrote this book, very few people were prepared to challenge the Gates Foundation for what it seems to have done, and it's done a lot of harm, frankly. But this is a great book for the two. But people who want to, I don't know if you can send books like this to Harry and Meghan Markle, if there's a way of doing it, but they really need to read this book. And this lady is based in the UK, by the way, the author. So, Fabien, I know you sent to me, before we get to the New Zealand update, Fabien sent to me, Jason, the one-pager that I suggested go up on...
It's 3 pages. Mm-hmm. It's 3 pages normally.
Well, this is the one I have.
Oh? That's the last, where there were 2 additional pages in front of it.
Do you want to email those to me, Fabien?
If
you can email them, but we can spend, just this page alone,
yeah.
Fabien, is really very incriminating.
No, but that's not the one. I made some rather precise comments in it, so I think for the viewers, why don't you follow on New Zealand? I'll send to Jason, and in the meantime, and then we can restart that.
No problem.
Okay. On this 3 pages.
All right.
Okay.
Good.
Thank you.
So Wednesday was our last show, and it aired at 4 p.m. I had sent the slides to Jason. I think I got them to you at like 2 or thereabouts, and I was looking for things to do. So I thought, what the heck, why don't I send an email to the Prime Minister of New Zealand warning her about the show that I was going to do about New Zealand and their propensity for supporting a complex set of frauds through the Clinton Health Access Initiative. So I have copied out there's some pleasantries that I leave out, but I've copied out the bulk, and obviously I leave my email address out of this. This is an actual email that was sent at 3:01 on the 15th of January, 2020, in a nutshell saying, listen, Madam Prime Minister, you got a serious set of problems on your hands. By the way, I'm the guy who likes to expose complex frauds. I started with GE. And I just give some salient points of the broadcast that we did last Wednesday. And I get a response, an initial response right away, the canned response that you can get when you send something in to a world leader. And then I got a real response at 8:12 p.m. on the 16th of January, which would have been their 17th of January, saying, I left the name of the person out who sent this to me, but I have the name, saying, thank you for your email, specifically noting that it's about the Clinton Health Access Initiative. We send this to the Minister of Foreign Affairs. Here's the person's name, and my email's been sent to that minister's office, and I'm going to follow up with that minister. Thank you for writing to this lady, and they use her first name. Now, in case you missed the broadcast, the point is that here, Jacinda Ardern is a young lady, almost 40, single mother, young baby, and we have obtained, and others have obtained, it's all in the presentation from Wednesday, information that proves that New Zealand wired money to entities that were an entity that was fraudulently, in quotes, organized, that operated from September 9th, 2009 until December 8th, 2011 without bylaws. Now, what that's like, Jason, when you say you operate without bylaws, that's like saying, I did a podcast without a camera. I mean, without sound. I mean, you can't do a podcast without camera.
the internet, Charles.
And the internet, right?
We couldn't do it.
You can't do it. And so, nonetheless, the Clintons took this money, and they took money, as we go in the broadcast, we go through, they managed to convince the country, this is before Jacinda was prime minister, they managed to convince this country that of all the godforsaken places in the world where you might try to make baby food, let's do that in Ethiopia, where there's no electricity to speak of, no roads, the people are not in cities. It's a tough climate to operate in because you have big extremes of elevation, low to high, it's a hot country, you have arid portions, you have not so arid portions, no roads, as I mentioned, very small internal consumption. How do you make sure that this baby food that you're making, stays well protected, that is not toxic, when the big baby food manufacturers around the world have had a serious problem putting toxic metals into baby food? So this is the 3-pager, Fabien.
Yes.
Yeah.
The miracle
You have
of
it?
the
Go on,
internet.
Matt?
I'll let you take us through this.
Okay. I'm going to do for our viewers what we call a small forensic exercise of a bank wire instruction issued by the Clinton Foundation in 2008. The bank wire instruction is on the left of the screen. It has been issued by the Clinton Foundation to a European government who has been a large donor to the Clinton Foundation. We won't disclose his name at this stage because there is currently an investigation going on by some, we call that accomplices, Charles, of our work.
Yes. Yeah.
And they want to have, they need a bit, some calm to make sure they get all the information they need. So this is the instruction. And if you go on the right-hand side of the page, you will see an extract of the so-called metadata of that PDF file. It was issued on September 18th, 2008 by a certain Mr. C. Johnson. We don't know who Mr. C. Johnson is. But, that was sent to this government to receive money. Now, just looking at it, as you can see, first, there are two references to the Clinton Foundation HIV/AIDS initiative. One at the top, and one as the so-called beneficiary name at the bank, which is Bank of America in New York. Now, and then we're going to discuss exactly the beneficiary name as the second step of this analysis. Now, there's also an address at the bottom of that official document, which is a Boston, Massachusetts address. The problem is that we already know that on March 31st, 2008, effective December 31st, 2007, the Commonwealth of Massachusetts had revoked the CHI, we call it CHI, old CHI, but the Clinton Foundation HIV/AIDS initiative license to operate in Massachusetts for repetitive failures to comply with yearly filing requirements, as this has been expressed by email by the state in question to one of our colleagues. And am I correct, Charles, on that one?
100%.
Okay. Now, basically, at this stage, we can state that the beneficiary, if it is the Clinton Foundation HIV/AIDS initiative, unlawfully issues an instruction from Massachusetts state after its license to operate in this state has been revoked by it. And this is something that, any dumb investigator should quickly understand. Okay? Let's go to the second page.
Can I just,
if you have any comment?
I just want to comment a few things here. It's significant. This on its own is horrible. But it's important to understand, we know direct from Maura Paley's mouth in writing, Maura Paley being later by 2015 the replacement for Eric Braverman, we know from her mouth that senior Clinton Foundation people knew that prior to this, in July of 2008, Ira Magaziner and Anil Soni confessed to diverting, that's the way they would have said it, I would have said stealing $23 million. The leadership of the Clinton Foundation knew that the management, Ira Magaziner and the CEO, had diverted, stolen $23 million. And instead of like winding the thing up and begging for mercy, they say, oh, no, let's send a solicitation request to another government to support a fake charity that they knew was fraudulent, but let's not send the money to Massachusetts. Let's send it to New York, where this entity never registered. Clinton Foundation HIV/AIDS never registered. I mean, this right here is not a bombshell. It's a Moab crater, the mother of all bomb. This is an unbelievable piece of paper. I mean, it needs to be believed and taken seriously. And that they would send this to 100 West 33rd Street, which is a special building.
Well, there's no bank there, right?
Currently no Bank of America, but we checked and there may have been a special office of Bank of America. But this is the kind of stuff that Mr. Huber needs to get into bigly. Was Clinton Foundation validly registered in New York in 2008? The answer is an entity called the William J. Clinton Foundation or William J. Clinton Foundation never registered to do business in New York until July of 2009. So, I mean, to say that you've looked into this and there's nothing there is really to admit that you have a serious substance abuse problem. There's a lot here. So with that, Fabien, let's go to the next page.
So let's go to the second page. Jason, please. So let's do now, an analysis of this wire instruction, which sits on the left of the screen, and just focusing on at this stage, on the beneficiary. The beneficiary is described as the Clinton Foundation HIV/AIDS Initiative, full stop. You can see it by yourself. This is exactly what it is. Now, the problem is that the Clinton Foundation HIV/AIDS Initiative is not a legal name. The legal name for this is the Clinton Foundation HIV/AIDS Initiative, Inc. And the problem with that is in September 2008, there was no legal entity named Clinton Foundation HIV/AIDS Initiative, Inc., because it had merged on December 31st, 2005, in a very stealthily manner, same way as an F-35 flying, into the William J. Clinton Foundation, Inc., and should have been liquidated as a result of the merger, of its merger into the absorbing entity. Charles and I are specialists of merger and acquisition. When you merge a company into another one, the absorbed company is dissolved, liquidated, and there's special filings attached to that. Well, the problem is that, and I've checked it for myself twice, looking at the Arkansas State Registry. Well, there was never any what they call articles of dissolution form filed for the Clinton Foundation HIV/AIDS Initiative, Inc., which means two things. Either this entity was basically not working anymore, and it was a mistake. But the problem is that 3 years down the line, or actually 2 years down the line, the Massachusetts state revoked the license of this entity to operate in Massachusetts because it never made its filing, it never filed anything. Or the other possibility is that it was kept stealthily, undetected, because it was used for other purposes. Now, that's at this stage is a theory, but here we find suddenly a bank account under the name of an entity, or at least using the name of an entity, which should have disappeared 2 years before. So that's a very big problem, and Mr. Durham should look into that for sure. Okay.
Right.
Now, there is another possibility we also looked into, Charles, which was that the Clinton Foundation HIV/AIDS initiative, not being the name of illegal entity, could have been the name of what you call in the US a fictitious name. Now, a fictitious name is a sort of shortened version of the legal name that you can use, and you can even use bank accounts with that. Charles, correct me if I'm wrong.
Well, you can't, in New York, you can't. So
well, the problem, I think, that you received an email stating that from New York State stating that neither the Clinton Foundation HIV/AIDS initiative nor the William J. Clinton Foundation Inc. had ever filed for a fictitious name anyway. So
right.
Basically, if it's not a fictitious name, if it's not the name of a legal entity, what it is? What is it? I mean, and I'm asking viewers, if they have views on that, to come back to us.
Well, no, if I can elaborate a little bit, Fabien. So it'd be one thing if we could just stay to that for a second. It'd be one thing if the people around this mess were people who weren't people who went to law school and were rogue scholars and were PhDs and never been in government or hadn't been the attorney general or the top legal officer of the country. It'd be one thing if you're an amateur and you do this. This, to me, is bright line evidence, and not only of a set of crimes with regard to this one request. This is a request on Clinton Foundation letterhead from Massachusetts. Clinton Foundation is a fictitious name that was registered in Arkansas, but to my knowledge has never been lawfully registered in any other state. And in our country, when you go into a new state, you have to register. If you want to use a fictitious name, you got to register that name in every state, and you've got to do it lawfully. So this is a request sent out, likely using electronic media, using a fake letterhead name, a fake address, for a fake initiative, asking for money to be sent using wires. The list of crimes on this piece of paper would capture a lot of ink for whoever's going to draw it up. And beyond that, you can't have a bank account in New York for something that has a fictitious name that hasn't been registered.
As a DBA.
You have to go through a process. And in New York State, as we discovered the email you're referring to, we have an email, and it's safe, and multiple people have it, from the New York Secretary of State saying that no fictitious names have ever been registered for the Clinton Foundation entities in New York. And remind you, she was a senator in September of 2008. She was representing New York State when this was going on.
Can I share something with you?
Sure.
Yeah.
So I've just discovered this while we're broadcasting right here. This is a page from Bank of America. We're looking at investor.bankofamerica.com, and I've found the address of 133 West 33rd Street, but it's BANC of America Securities LLC. This seems odd to me. Why are they spelling it like that?
No, that's I don't know, but that's it doesn't make a tremendous amount of sense for the Bank of America, which is all over this fraud. In Little Rock, they lent money when they shouldn't have. In Texas, a division of it, I think, raped a account of a foundation of two wonderful people who had died decades before they started scamming money out of their charitable foundation that was under the auspices of Bank of America. There's so many examples of criminal behavior with regard to the Clinton Foundation involving the Bank of America. That's a whole other broadcast we might do. But anyway, is there other stuff you might want to talk about to the right here, Fabien?
Yeah, well, just I've used basically the same layout than the one you use. So what is in red is seriously problematic, and the questions I have raised on this specific issue of the beneficiary's name is, what does this name represent? Can you open a bank account under the name of a program? Because at
No.
that time, actually, the Clinton Foundation initiative was supposedly, after the merger, a program of the Clinton Foundation, the William J. Clinton Foundation. So your response is no. So it's not a program, it's not an Inc., and it's not a fictitious name. So what is it? And basically how Bank of America made possible to open a bank account under a name which is neither legal nor fictitious, and filed to New York State Registrar. I mean, I don't understand. And so I'm asking the viewers, and Charles, obviously, your help as well, to try to clarify this issue. There may be an explanation, but I haven't found it, and people have asked, haven't found it either.
Well, it's not a good explanation. So September 16th, 2008 is a date I remember well, because that's the first day, the second time I was on television was the first time being as a guest contestant and imposter on To Tell the Truth in September of 1977. It's the second time I was on TV to talk about General Electric that day at 5 p.m. So in that moment, on September 16th, that's the day that the US government, I think the Fed seized, that's the day they seized AIG, that's after Lehman failed. This is a moment where people needed money desperately.
Hank Paulson was sweating.
Well, and presidential candidates needed money. So it's logical that the Clinton campaign and the Obama campaign said, you know what, let's find as many schmucks as we can to give us money and have them route it to our crooked foundation account here in New York. So yeah, this is really shocking stuff here, Fabien, that you have in this page 3.
So the page 3 is now focusing on obviously the same wire instruction, which sits on the right of the screen, but focusing only on the bank account number and the bank address. Now, on the left, what I've inserted is actually the filing to the Commonwealth of Massachusetts Registry. The Clinton Foundation was supposed to do every year, and this is the one it has done from 2005 to 2007, with exactly the same information as provided in this on the screen. Prior to 2005, there was no disclosure of U.S. bank accounts, and disclosure of U.S. bank accounts is an obligation under a number of state registries, and the Massachusetts one is not only a requirement, but also is very detailed. So what you can see is basically on the right side, the Clinton Foundation is suggesting to wire the money to Bank of America in New York with a bank account number. And if you look at the bank account number on the left side, it's almost the same, except a 3 digit is missing at the end of it. And but it sits in Little Rock. So I'm asking viewers, and especially viewers with strong banking exposure, to explain if this is possible. I've heard one explanation, but it was not confirmed, that with some banks you can have a master account with one set of number and then some other accounts which are kind of subdivision of the main account. But the truth of the matter is the New York bank account was never disclosed to the Massachusetts registry, and that is unlawful.
Well,
Charles, do you have anything you'd like to add?
Yeah, I mean, I think what the Clinton charity scam and corruption scam business plan is all about is trying to get bank accounts opened around the world to which money may be sent to pay for influence. That's what this is all about. I mean, there's nothing accident. Every other one of these bank account numbers to Massachusetts has an extra digit than the first one. This isn't an accidental error. They're trying to fool Massachusetts, right? They're not telling Massachusetts, which is where this Clinton Foundation HIV/AIDS thing was supposedly being run from. They're not telling them about the New York bank account. And again, you think back. We know, we've all met Jerry Corsi, who was now in his almost mid-70s, and at the tail end of the Mueller probe. The FBI agents raided his home and then sweated him and tough questioning. If you got the team that investigated Corsi, the team that, the most aggressive, respectful, but tough people, and their forensic accountants to look at this, again, it shouldn't take you more than a few days to understand that this is a crooked enterprise. What could take months, and what I think Durham and Barr and others I hope are doing, is to figure out the full extent of this fraud. How many people knew about it? How many people profited from it? How much of that profit can be seized? How many penalties can be exacted? How many people need to go to jail? And how far does this fraud run? That will take time. But to understand that it's a fraud shouldn't take a seasoned investigator more than a week.
May I present something that
And
could
to understand
possibly...
these 3 pages, it should take, well, let's say about 3 seconds.
Okay.
Charles?
Just
No?
to,
Don't you think so?
Yeah.
Yeah.
should take about 3 seconds to go through. Yeah.
Go ahead.
Well, just to present something that might be dismissed as conspiracy theory, I would point out that this mysterious Bank of America office at 100 West 33rd Street that may or may not be there, I've said many times, 33 I think is a number that's used in steganographic messaging. The number 93 is associated with Aleister Crowley's 9-3 Society. Of course, his motto was, "Do what thou willst." And perhaps this bank account is a coded message to someone with the 93, 3 sevens, and then a 33. I mean, it's way out there, but that's a lot of stuff that is seen in other strange places that could be a message to someone.
Yeah, I agree. So, are we done on this, Fabien?
Yes, we are.
Good. Thank you very much. That's really, that background. Try to remember what we just went through as we now progress through a number of pages where we'll explain to Mrs. Chiquita Bananahead just how much evidence is in the public domain concerning the extent of this fraud. So if we go to the next page, these are just a few points. What I did here in this slide is to lay out information concerning a number of supposed charitable entities that are all connected to the Clintons. The original one was called the William J. Clinton Presidential Foundation, hence the initials. My suspicion is that there were activities prior to the official incorporation on October 23rd, 1997. We have that from Taylor Branch's book. We have it from lots of public stuff that efforts were underway almost immediately when Bill won in '92 to scare up money for this presidential library. That's a big, it's okay to have informal preparation take place, but it's not okay to solicit money and pledges, firm binding commitments for people without having a legal entity. That's a big no-no. The articles of incorporation for the main charity were never formally adopted by the initial directors. That's a requirement. The fact that the lawyer sends a filing into the Secretary of State does not mean that a board meeting, your first board meeting happened, and directors who were properly appointed came together and adopted the Articles of Incorporation. Without Articles of Incorporation having been adopted, bylaws weren't signed in theory, and we don't know that these were signed by directors until the 23rd of December. They never filed a tax return for that thing, and they've never gotten a compliant audit for the main charity. So that's the main charity. In Chai, following up on the New Zealand presentation, there were substantial activities that we'll go through in a second, going back to early 2002, that were not properly reported by Chai. The Articles of Incorporation that we've seen were actually invalid under Arkansas law. They did not meet certain minimum requirements that are statutory. They were never adopted by the initial directors. The bylaws in the case of the U.S. filings are unsigned. In the case of filings presented in Bahamas on the 3rd of February, after the 3rd of February, they're dated by hand the 3rd of February. In the case of New Zealand, they're shown to be in print, typed, adopted only by the 8th of December 2011. Chai operates in tens of countries. We don't know what other versions yet have been presented around the world. But this, in the case of the William J. Clinton Presidential Foundation and Chai, the two biggest pieces of this mess, they're not organizations. They're not formal organizations. And unless you're an organization, you shouldn't ordinarily get tax exemption. Then in the case of these others, Clinton Global Initiative, Clinton Bush Haiti Fund, Alliance for a Healthier Generation, C40 Cities, gigantic activities before the respective dates of their articles. None of the articles of these companies have been adopted, the ones that are on file, by directors. In 2 cases, they were signed, but in both of these cases, not contemporaneously with the Articles of Incorporation, which means in the case of CGI and CBHF, these entities functioned and did significant work for major commitments before they were formally organized, disqualifying them ordinarily from being a charity. C40 Cities is interesting because Mike Bloomberg, who wants to spend $1 billion becoming president now, the bylaws in New York State, and people could check this later, that are on file for C40 Cities are for an entity called Cities, not C40 Cities. So they have never filed bylaws, as far as I can tell, for this large thing that operates around the world. So there's been some chit-chat on my Twitter feed and other people criticizing the work that we've done, saying, I'm not a lawyer and I don't understand that, all these details are difficult to do and people make mistakes and can't we just get along?
Yeah.
The point is that if you want to get the valuable benefit of being able to solicit money across state lines and around the world on a basis where your donors can deduct the amount of money that they give you from their personal income taxes, from their foundational tax returns, and if you want the privilege of being able, if you make more in revenue than expenses, of not paying corporate income taxes, these are valuable privileges that we don't give out to anybody. We give them to people who play by the rules. The more than 90% or 95% of people in America who play by the rules in the charity business are being egregiously harmed by the political thugs who've lit on the idea of creating almost a monarchical benefit to ex-presidents. You work hard, you didn't make that much money for 4 or 8 years. We'll let you we'll give you this charity over here. You'll say that you're housing the records. You do what you want, you destroy the records, nobody will ever know. Only your supporters will get involved with these things. And you can then go around the world like Harry and Meghan and Barack and Michelle and Bill and Hillary. You can go around the world asserting that you're saving the planet and, excuse this language, and dumb fucks around the world who are going to send small bits of money into these charities, and really crooked people are going to get all in to support you. But you just start here. There never was a Clinton Foundation that was organized lawfully anywhere in the world. And this is a special type of charity, the Clinton Foundation. It is not like if Fabien had an American charity for the Chalandon family, you can do that, right? You can set it up. You better make sure that the family members are qualified to run it, but you're allowed to do that. You don't get the same tax benefits that a public charity might get. And that's what these are supposed to be. These things are supposed to be independent from the Clinton family, and instead they're under the boot and heels of Bill, Hillary, and Chelsea Clinton, it's preposterous.
Yeah. And Charles, I just don't buy the argument that you and eventually me don't know how to read legal documents. That is quite preposterous. As for investment bankers who've been used to in-depth due diligence of companies, that's the first thing we look at. And we don't need lawyers for that. We only need lawyers if there's a very complicated legal issue. But reading through incorporation and legal documentation for companies is rather straightforward. And it's probably good for this series of books called legal for dummies. You see what I mean?
Right. Or, yeah.
Right. So people who write to you that, I mean, they don't really know what they're talking about.
Well, thank you for that, Fabien. I happen to agree with you. So if we could jump to the next page, and we're going to rip through these slides faster than you might think. I took the liberty, since people have given up on Huber, perhaps justifiably, of posing a few questions that need to be answered by anybody who thinks that they can exonerate the Clinton Foundation. So this is an excerpt from that famous MOU. People can get to it by following the link. And it said, this is an MOU signed by Valerie Jarrett on the 16th of November 2008. A single entity, William J. Clinton Foundation, is a 501c3 charitable organization. No part of that sentence is correct, right? And it's not comprised of all these initiatives. None of that was accurate before or after November 16th, 2008. Any lawyer can tell you that. Anybody who knows how to read English can tell you that. Now, we got into this question, Fabien, of your great work of opening up bank accounts around the world. If we hit this open corporates thing, link, people have seen this before, and it's an excellent tool for trying to figure out and identify monkey business. If you punch in here, Jason, Clinton Foundation HIV, and then hit the search thingy. Okay, you'll see that on the 9th of July in 2004, they created something called the Clinton Foundation HIV/AIDS, missing the S, initiative. Now this is significant because in this time frame, as we're going to get into in the coming weeks,
In Tanzania.
the Clintons had been hard at work with Ira Magaziner trying to convince a number of governments around the world and eventually the Global Fund to send tens of millions of dollars towards Tanzania. And they needed a catchment vehicle. Tanzania actually has laws, and they are enforced even if you're working with the president of that country. So you had to create a catchment vehicle. And I suspect we're going to find this is not quite its real name. And that, you remember, that's the way they did the wire instruction. Not quite the right bank account number. You want to create a multiplicity of these things so that you can arrange from your crooked allies to route money to this bank account. You get $10 million to use that number in Tanzania, and there'll be people, dancing in the streets. That's a lot of money translated to local Tanzanian currency, and a lot of incoming hard currency, which the nation needs. Then you look in South Africa, they created Clinton Foundation HIV/AIDS Initiative, and I think both of these companies still exist. So, they weren't liquidated at year-end 2005, and this is just one service. I don't have the ability, the way the FBI would and others, the French equivalent and others, to go around the world and try to come up with any account connected to any current or former member of the Clinton orbit. And I think you're going to sweep up and get a large number of additional accounts here. So it wasn't a single entity by any stretch of the imagination back on November 16th, 2008, when Valerie Jarrett signed that piece of paper. So if we then go back into the...
And Charles, if I may just
Sure.
on this issue of the merger in 2005, on December 31st, 2005, you and I know that when you merge two companies, you have a merger agreement and you have the balance sheet of the absorbed entity with details of its assets, liabilities, and bank accounts. Right. Well, the merger agreement, which was filed, did not provide any list of assets, did not provide any list of foreign subsidiaries, did not provide any list of bank accounts.
Yeah.
Is that, on purpose? Obviously.
Yeah, well, take it, building on that point, Fabien, Arkansas law is specific on this point, that only the Attorney General of Arkansas was supposed to pass on the question of whether each of the entities were validly organized and operated at the time of the attempted merger, and also on whether the acquirer, that is to say, at the time, William J. Clinton, the William J. Clinton Foundation, had lawful authority to control the operations of Clinton Foundation HIV/AIDS Initiative, which it did not. There's no evidence in the public domain that Clinton Foundation HIV/AIDS Initiative ever received tax exemption from the IRS. And as you rightly point out, Fabien, there's no evidence of the paperwork that you would need to effect this merger in Arkansas, in all the states, and around the world. There's no tax return for the target in the merger. The non-surviving entity was supposed to fill out Schedule N, which would lay out, what happened in the liquidation, supposedly, of this entity. So there's just a ream of missing documents, a ream of incomplete documents. It's a bold-faced and obvious fraud that somebody should have known about well before 2006, 7, 8, and 9, when, as we'll get into this, there's a lot more. In a good set of questions, we know in the Hillary Clinton case, there are 38 parts to her file, the classified information file in the FBI vault, but there are only 3 parts to the Clinton Foundation investigation file for 2001 to 2005. There's a lot more the FBI obviously had, may have destroyed. What were they doing for 4 long years under George W. Bush as this Clinton Foundation fraud escalated? Why, this is a story we've been over before, why did Acosta, who had to resign from the Labor Department Secretary, why did he give Epstein credit for creating the Clinton Global Initiative in July of 2007?
What do you mean Acosta gave him credit for that?
I'll show you. Hit this. There's a letter. There was a proceeding where the sentencing proceeding for Epstein, they were trying to conjure up arguments. And if you go down the page here, this story, by the way, appeared July 6, 2016, which is just after, I think, Hillary Clinton was, quote, cleared. If you go down this page a little bit, you'll get to the letter. There it is.
Whoa.
July 6, 2007. And it's a long letter. People can get the actual letter. I don't think we have the whole letter here. But this isn't the kind of letter, when you're in trouble, apparently, you'll throw yourself, your lawyers will contact. And this, you see, it says here, President Clinton, in a feature article in New York Magazine, Clinton described Epstein as a committed philanthropist. Yeah.
Philanderer?
Incarcerated philanthropist was probably what I would... He reached this conclusion during a month-long trip to Africa with Mr. Epstein. Month-long trip. I don't think Bill Clinton spent a month with Epstein in Africa. I think it was a week.
That's a long time.
That's a hell of a long time, and I don't think he did that. Anyway, this is a letter that went under Acosta's signature it's much longer than this, and it goes on and on and on, and mentions specifically, this is Lefcourt put this one in, but he did this, I think, with working around Acosta and also with Dershowitz, I think,
So
making
this is
a claim.
when he was a U.S. attorney in Florida. Acosta.
That's to that person, yeah. But this is the address of the person it's going to. The letter is from Gerald Lefcourt, who was working, I think, with Acosta.
Why would Acosta sign it? It's from the law offices of
No,
Gerald.
it's not. No, keep going down. No, I may have misspoken. This is a letter from Epstein's attorney,
Right.
seeking lenience before in a proceeding, claiming that this guy's a committed philanthropist, Epstein, and that he created the Clinton Global Initiative. Why would a lawyer write such a letter, which is obviously false, because there was no such thing as the Clinton Global Initiative lawfully in 2007. This is Epstein operating in New York. The Clinton Global Initiative, as we'll show you, is based in New York. To make this claim would seem to be a very risky thing to do.
Well, I know a lot of lawyers who lie about stuff for a lot of different reasons.
Right. Good. So just flipping, trying to make sure we don't go on.
This must be a lawfare lawyer.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes.
Why then? That's the 6th of July 2007. On the 10th of July 2007, they opened up. They created, Bruce Lindsay and Andrew Kessel and lawyers created this William J. Clinton Foundation UK illegally. They represented to the government of the UK that they had the authority to do this, and the entity was created. In the Clinton Foundation annual reports that exist for 1998 to 2007, there's a line that says, contributions from governments. We don't need to pull the link up. And it's blank. for 10 years. Right? All these governments are giving hundreds of millions of dollars, and nobody's saying, "Oh, wait a minute, how come you're not giving me credit on the form here for a government I gave you like 100 million. How come I'm not in your tax return?" And nobody said anything about it.
I needed another 100 to disappear from somewhere else.
Right. And then March of 2008, why in the UK? Why in the UK did the UK government grant authority to this fraudulent William J. Clinton Foundation UK to be a charity in the UK? It had no authority to do that. And in November, Kamiki Gibson had written this draft memo, which the Clinton Foundation, I believe, has authenticated for John Solomon's reporting, stating, and we've had this memo up before, but it's a disaster. It's basically, we're guilty as shit. We don't know what we're doing here. We had a lawyer, I'm a lawyer who's writing up and reciting all the criminal behavior that I want to talk about, focusing on the main foundation, not getting into Chai. What do you think, Mr. CEO? Do we have a problem? It's like, yeah, we got a huge problem. Why don't I represent to Barack Obama in this MOU that everything's hunky-dory, and why don't I sign it in December, which Bruce Lindsay did? So explain that. And then if we hit this here, this is another version of the Unitaid financial statements, and if you go to page 38, the last page. Fabian and I have been over this many, many times. Okay, here's this.
That's for sure.
This Clinton Foundation HIV/AIDS initiative that was supposed to be liquidated by December 31st, 2012. $500 million, 559,024, had been sent from Switzerland to an entity that didn't exist. Almost half of all the 1.2 billion that Unitaid had sent in multiple transactions went to an entity that didn't exist. Of course, I probably in Geneva in UN land, and they're all sitting there going like, that's how we roll. That's what we do. We create these funds. We create Global Fund. We create Gavi, this high-sounding thing, that climate change thing, whatever. We have all those things operate in Switzerland where we can control what's really going on, and then we rape and pillage. We find partners who will say they received the money, but then collaborate in making the money disappear. So what do you have to say to that, Mr. Banana Man, Mr. Angel Urena? There's no evidence here of fraud? I guess you don't know how to read and you don't know anything about math. And by the way, this is thousands of dollars. This is not $559,024. This is $559 million. When? Year by year. In 2008, Jason, was there anything going on in America in 2008 in politics?
I think B-Rock was running for president.
And Hillary Clinton needed to pay off some debts. So Unitaid sends the Clinton Foundation HIV/AIDS initiative $140 million at a time where there was no such entity during a presidential campaign year. In 2012, B-Rock needs to get reelected. So let's send him another $76 million. And Hubert doesn't want to investigate this because, he's too busy. There's more important things.
Yeah, and Charles, if I may add, because we made the reconciliation of the funds sent by Unitaid to the old Chai, and just on 2007 and 8, it's about $77.4 million missing. So that's something very simple for an investigator to analyze. And in one of the presentations, I think it was in May 2008, I presented the count of the different names used by Unitaid in their annual report. And I've counted 7 different names for the Clinton Foundation. Okay, so, and even Unitaid does not know which name to use.
Yeah.
So, it's absurd. Absurd. It's scandalous, outrageous.
Yeah. And within Unitaid, there are board minutes, there are different kind of minutes, multiple meetings are held, typically in fancy places where you got to stay in expensive hotels. All these people get together and nobody asks a question, Does this Clinton Foundation HIV/AIDS initiative actually exist? Reminds me of, I worked for the Industrial Bank of Japan at one point for 3 years. And, And the Industrial Bank of Japan back in the late 80s and early 90s was a leading global institution whose mission was to serve governments, multilateral organizations, and only AAA rated borrowers, or principally AAA rated borrowers. And there was a scandal, I think in 91 or thereabouts, where they had to admit that instead of the senior guys would sit around talking about their loan portfolio, and either the second or third largest borrower for the Industrial Bank of Japan was a massage parlor owner who was the mistress of Matsushita, the big electronics.
Panasonic.
And you can sit these Japanese people, going around, all these bankers are like, oh yeah, okay, we gave this money to the UN, and this to America, and Madame Onaway's massage parlor is number 3, and we don't have a problem with that.
Well, it's geisha.
Just nuts. So these are just a few questions. We have many more we're going to go through in a second, but if you want to try to redeem the FBI's reputation, the DOJ's reputation, Mr. Barr and Mr. Durham, you've got to answer these questions. You've got to go down these paths. You've got to understand the motivation that the Clintons, the Obama, and the Bushes have to try to cover this up, because this game has been going on for decades. Now we go to the next page, and here we will. These pages are set up, and for people who don't like numbers, they look daunting, but they're set up to be gone over at people's leisure. You print the document out. Hopefully, you have a color printer. And let me just make some basic points here. These are financial reports. Of course, notorious BKD had something to do with both the supposed audit and the annual report on Form 990 in this year. These reports were put together between November 10th, 2010 and the 15th of November, 2010. Ordinarily, there shouldn't be much of a discrepancy between the forms that are in an audit and the forms that are in the annual report to the IRS. One is for financial reporting, one is for the equivalent of tax reporting. And when I see, even if they're small errors, these are small errors on the right. You see they don't rise. There's one that's 5% of the audited amount, 5.45 on the right. But there are errors nonetheless, and there shouldn't be errors.
And isn't 5% kind of big? I thought more than 1 or 2% is significant.
Three. So then you go down the page and you say, all right, this is a report for 2009, mind you, submitted in 2010. Jason, what in program expenses are the most important expenses in a charity? That's what you're supposed to spend your money on. You're supposed to have authority. You're supposed to operate the thing, to devote yourself to only carrying out programs for which you're authorized. What is the largest single expense there that you see for programs? Hint, it's at the top of the table.
Restaurants, 5-star restaurants and 5-star hotels. That's
and
the most
five-star hookers.
Where does it say that?
Hookers and blow, Jason. Hookers and blow.
Yeah. Who is rating them?
Old Chai is listed. Remember, this is an entity, Old Chai, which on December 31st, 2009, the CEO of the entity says to the IRS under penalties of perjury, I had no activities in 2009. Here's a report filled out November 10th, 2010 and 15th November 2010 saying 73% of the program expenses were for an entity that supposedly didn't exist in 2009. A further almost 6% were for the Clinton Global Initiative. That, they say in 2010, when they apply for tax exemption, didn't exist in 2009. Another 5% is to Clinton Climate Initiative, which has never existed lawfully anywhere. So all told, 83.8% of the activities that the Clinton Foundation declared that it carried out in 2009 were unauthorized. 83.8%. But Mr. Huber doesn't see a problem with that. It's not 99.999. It's only 83.8%. And the WAPU doesn't see a problem with that. And Rachel Maddow doesn't see a problem with that. This is absurd for we numbers people. You look at something like this and you say, well, if maybe 1% were unauthorized, maybe you give them a pass. 83.8% are unauthorized. So that's for 2009. Let's go to the next page. Did they get 2010 right, you might wonder. Okay, so 2010, they fill out an audit, the notorious BKD again, BAD, they should change their name to. They put out an audit for the whole, and the supposed whole consolidated entity, everything around the world. But they fill out a tax return for a stub, a portion of the Clinton Foundation. Under New York law, you're not allowed to do that. Under California law and most law, you can't do that. Show me an audit for the consolidated entity. Give me a 990 for the consolidated entity. If you want to show me a 990 for a portion of the Clinton Foundation, give me an audit, if it's this big, of that portion too. But they never did that. So they said, we're going to give you an audit that we really didn't check anyway because we're notorious BAD, and then we'll file out this piece of garbage paper on the 14th of November 2011 that shows that our audited revenues are 178 million more than our 990. Programs, 185 million. We're going to show on the audit that we made money, 17 million, 17.5, but in the 990 we're going to say that we made 34.2 million. And the directors are like, that's fine, whatever you guys want to do. This was garbage, this is nonsense. And this should never have happened. Understand, these are interesting dates. 30 September 2011 to 14 November 2011. That's just when Simpson-Thatcher was brought in. October 27th, 2011 is when Simpson-Thatcher was brought in to study the Clinton Foundation, right? And I think in part it was because somebody looked at this, maybe Chelsea or somebody said, wait a minute, this is so wrong. None of this is right. And then you look at this stub in the 990. These are the programs they said they carried out. Haiti for 50 million. They had no authority at the Clinton Foundation to raise money for Haiti. They never got authority for that. Clinton Climate, I told you, didn't exist.
And where did it go?
Well, no one knows. And then this idea that you would put something up that says 28% of my program expenses, we're just going to call that other. Don't look at $28 million. It's just other, So all told here, 92% of the activities declared on the 990 for the Clinton Foundation concerning 2010 in 2011, 92% were obviously unauthorized. Obviously. And what did Lois Lerner do? I don't care. What did Huber do? Well, obviously nothing here. I'll take 2 years to figure this out. There's nothing here.
He should be shopping for Star Wars toys.
Along with Comey. So this is the first attempt. They do this attempt in 2011 to report on 2010. But wait, it gets better. Let's look and see what happened in 2015, Jason, on the next page. Okay, they redo 2010, and where before the audit was a lower number than the 990, now the audit is a higher number. It goes from a $34.5 million profit in the 990 down to 16.8 million. And nobody says, wait a minute, how do you have such wildly different numbers? This is on November 16th, 2015. And again, the same thing applies. The program expenses haven't changed that much, the way they talk about them, but the profit and loss has changed a lot. So that's a major league problem. Okay, so if we go to the next page. Now, I did mention to you that the Clinton Foundation illegally obtained tax exemption for Chai and for other entities in 2009 and 10 and 11. This is an excerpt from the MOU, that same thing we showed you before. It said, if Senator Clinton's confirmed, the foundation, which at that point in time was William J. Clinton Foundation, and in 2008, December 12, 2008, that entity, William J. Clinton Foundation, had not bothered to register validly in New York State, the state that Senator Clinton represented. Did such a great job of taking care of things. They're a great Clinton Foundation. We're not going to register in the state where I'm a senator because The New York press is totally corrupt. The Attorney General is corrupt. Nobody's ever going to investigate us. You know, she's going to, this William J. Clinton Foundation will continue to provide HIV and AIDS support activities to help foreign country contributors. None of this is lawful as a charity.
HIV and AIDS support would seem like you're causing the disease.
Right.
You want support for the cure.
So here, you know, they say that once she's confirmed, there's nothing in here about let's set up a new CHI. This seems to say if she's confirmed, the Clinton Foundation will continue to carry out operations doing HIV and AIDS work. Whereas on December 31st, 2009, they claimed to the IRS, time has passed, this new CHI that are you a successor? That is to say, are you taking over the operations of a predecessor operation? And of course they are, but they say no. And if you're going to take those operations over, you have to fill out this Schedule G, which is extremely lengthy. So then the other thing, in CHI and in these other forms, you're supposed to lay out in a separate attachment. You've got to describe your past activities, your present activities, your planned activities in great detail. They didn't do any of this. But, you know, Lois Lerner sitting there saying, you know, look, this is to protect Democrats. We can't have Republicans do well in the 2010 midterms. We got to sweep this under the rug. We'll just let this thing sail through. And so it gets a tax exemption on March 15th, 2010. So if we go to the next page. And I'm doing this in a very lighthearted fashion here. I'm not trying to bury people the way I could. But if you want just headlines, there's an audit, in quotes, for this CHI done for 2010. And then they have a 990 as well. And you do go through the same process between the 31st of August 2011 and the 15th of November 2011. There are these big differences. Revenues in the 990 are $20 million less than in the audit. The audit was done before the 990 was put in. Who in BKD allowed the audit to remain outstanding, saying revenues were 194 million, when they tell the IRS in the 990 6 weeks later, or whatever that is, 10 weeks later, they say, no, our revenues are light by 20 million, and they don't correct the audit.
It was a tiger. He did it.
And then it says, in here, mind you, this is 2011, so the FBI, Mueller, Rosenstein are investigating Ranbaxy. And they state, they don't specifically say that it's Ranbaxy, but they, in the Clinton Health Access 990 program services thing, 63% of the program expenses were for buying these, what it turned out to be, adulterated generic HIV and AIDS drugs. 63%. And once again, we have other at 42 million, 25 million. Other, no explanation. So this is the report concerning 2010 filed in 2011. They redo the report November 21st, 2013. Well, if we could just go back for a second, I skipped over something very important.
I didn't mean to advance it. That's
okay.
A mistake.
The audit says the thing made 15 million. The 990 says it lost. Now, if you start from scratch with no equity and you lose $4.9 million, that 4.9 has to come from somewhere. And they have never explained, you know, who funded the $4.9 million. You can't do this. There's no, you know, math doesn't, or double entry bookkeeping doesn't work for you this way. And so here, this time when they do it, the dolts at CHI, Ira Magaziner, the arrogant dolt, and others, sign these, or at least provide representations to the accounting firm and sign a tax return saying that they had 174 million in revenue, but they lost 5 million in their first full year of operations. Go to the next page. They go, when they look at it again, you know, on second thought, where I said 174 million, I actually had 67 million in revenue. And where I said I lost 4, I actually lost, on smaller revenue, I lost 2.5 million. So I probably did a worse job. And there are all these numbers that don't make any sense. And that ARV project disappeared. This is a report in 2013 talking about 2010. And nowhere do they explain, you know, what the hell happened in 2007, 8, and 9 with this Unitaid money that was sent to an organization that didn't exist. So we're in a place, and it's interesting, there are these Hillary supporting, Obama loving, Bush loving puff pieces that Angel Urena seems to love, that go around saying there's nothing here, there's nothing there. In truth, there's a tremendous amount of information in the public domain, and because of the attention that this subject got in 2015 and 16 and continues to get today, given the magnitude of this scandal, eventually the penny is going to drop off his headdress, and people are going to, or the banana is going to drop, and people around the world are going to say, this is something worth studying. This is a good set of cases. We've got all these videos this nutcase has put out with Jason. Notice I'm the nutcase, Jason, you're not. And our French colleague here, the distinguished inspector. We've got all this work they've done. We've got work other people have done. Stealing money, enriching yourself, running a charity is not something that people should do. We need to lay down some markers. This simply ain't right, particularly when former presidents and aspiring presidents and other world leaders think they're going to get away with this. So I would say, with no respect to people like Angel Urena and others who would say that, yeah, Huber, nothing burger, I would say that I'm not living in denial. They are. And they're soon going to discover people who would like to sign on to this view. And people tell me privately, who criticize the notion that the Clintons did anything wrong, they tell me privately, look, would you shut up already? Everybody knows this is a fraud. It's just nobody's going to do anything about it. That's not right. People don't pay trillions of dollars of tax revenue as a country to allow the leaders in both political parties to let something like this expand from the modest annoyance that it was in 1997 to become the gigantic example for how not to run a charity that it is today. This is a template for corruption. It sends the wrong message to the people who are smart enough that they can do well in school but don't really want to work, that the rules are for little people. We'll do what we want. We get to dress up. We get to fly around the world and have fun.
Dress up.
We need to rise up and send a message as the crowd that we are not going to take this anymore. It's time for real U.S. attorneys, real IRS people, and real foreign governments to do something and put these criminals in prison.
And Charles, if I may interject, from my perspective, at least from the European perspective, or even a Japanese perspective, the Clinton Foundation is not only the largest, probably, fraud ever organized by a US politician, it's probably the largest corruption vehicle ever organized, which has corrupted international relations for now a number of years, and that has to stop.
I agree. So, Jason, I don't know if you have anything to add. Sometimes you like to remind people about the importance of Patreoning.
Absolutely. The importance of Patreoning cannot be overstated. But actually, many people have been telling me that they're having an even better experience with Subscribestar. So if people are watching and enjoying the show, even if you only watch Sunday with Charles, it's very important that you become a sponsor. Go to subscribestar.com/crowdsourcethetruth or patreon.com/crowdsourcethetruth. Sponsor the show. I may need to buy a new router now. That is very difficult to explain how that occurred just minutes before we were supposed to go live. Total failure of the router. It's sitting there. No one's touching it. No one's doing anything to it. I don't know how that could have happened. But Fabian, thank you so much for joining us today. I want to thank all of our viewers and all of our sponsors. The real importance of the viewers becoming sponsors, Charles, is that we don't want to have an outlet that is swayed or controlled by some financial interest. Certainly Fox News, MSNBC, CNN would never allow this type of information out there. So if people want this to continue, the information is free, but keeping it all together over here to broadcast it to everybody, that's a job, and that's an ongoing effort that requires the support of the viewers. So thanks to everybody who's been doing that for us, and thanks to Fabian for joining us from across the globe. And with that, I wish everybody a good weekend, and see everybody tomorrow.
Thank you, Fabian.
And a Happy New Year too, guys.
Yes,
Thank you.
absolutely, and to you.
Take care.
everybody.
Bye-bye.